And if there's one thing that I could do going back, I would say, okay, I've got, let's say, a budget of $500,000 for all my resources, new hires that I want to make. I'm going to break the bank on this one role.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our founder's journey. This is actually our second part of the interview with my guest, Jan Arendtsz, who's based in San Carlos, California. He's the CEO and founder at Celigo. It's good to have you back on, Jan. This is where I'd love to hear a bit more of your journey, though. We understood more about your product last time, the integration platform as a service solution, an iPaaS. And I really want to hear, though, the journey that you've been on the last 10 years building this, but really before then. Let's go back even further.
Sure.
What's your story?
So my story is I'm a computer science grad because I was pretty good in maths. And so started out as a developer out of school for about 2.5 years, decided that was not my calling. I just didn't want to be sitting in a cubicle churning out code day and night. I wanted to understand. I think if I were to just summarize it, like I wanted to understand what is the business problem that we're trying to solve. I could not articulate that in that fashion back then, but looking back now, that's what I was looking for. So as a result, I ended up moving more to the business side.
Gotcha. It's going from developing code to saying, I actually want to know, why am I developing this code? Like what's the purposes out there? So getting into the business side. So where did that lead you next?
Right. So I joined a company called Cambridge Technology Partners, a fairly large global consulting firm. This was, I think, back in '97. And a phenomenal experience. Spent 4 years there. This coincided with the dot-com era as well. So we went from working on these really large projects for really large companies to then all of a sudden in San Francisco working at these dot-coms and running the show. And we are all young and we don't know what we're doing and we're all learning together. And as a result, just a tremendous learning experience, right? I played different roles from being a project manager, business analyst, a technical program manager, so on and so forth. And that's where I really learned my trade because you get exposed to so many different environments.
I imagine it was a lot of pretty fast paced and constantly learning, trying new things, and then growing. So for this though, Celigo is your first business that you ran.
Correct. So prior to that, I ran a small consulting firm for about 5 years, where it was focused on, and this was in the mid-2000s, focused on a number of the nascent cloud applications such as Salesforce, NetSuite, and some others, and doing various business process consulting and doing a fair bit of integration work, which ultimately is what
you do, Celigo, because you saw the problem, you're actually working on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the turning point for you to say, you know what, I have a solution here, and like how long did it take you to build that first MVP of the product?
Yeah, I think there were like maybe 2 of these light bulb moments. So prior to that, I worked at NetSuite for 3 years when it was literally a startup, and I joined, and I was coming from the consulting company that we just talked about, and I joined NetSuite, and they had all these small customers at that time, and it was chaotic, but it was also brilliant. And this was back in 2003, I think. And immediately I was like, within maybe 3-4 months, I was like, this is going to be the future of software. SaaS is really, this is the only model, right? And of course, now looking back, it's you can say, of course, that you should have thought about that. But that was a leap of faith for me. And so then I saw companies struggling to connect various apps. So the seed was planted, I'm going to say, back in like 2004, 2005. But decided to start a consulting company. And then to really answer your question, once we started doing a lot of work, business process engineering, and then doing some integration work, it became very clear that some of the products in the market were looking back rather than forward. And that was really the impetus for me to start Celigo.
So about like 4 or 5 years of doing that consulting business and then realizing, okay, this can turn into something a little bit bigger. Now, for when you launched Celigo, did you get funding right from the beginning? Did you bootstrap it from your consulting company? How did you do that?
Yeah, great question. So we bootstrapped. So the company started approximately in 2011. We had that consulting business on the side and we spun that off. So we started though with enough critical mass in terms of customers that we were able to bootstrap it for about 4 years, and we raised our Series A round at the end of 2015. So that was a journey. Let's say that was chapter 1, to bootstrap a company to a certain scale.
What would you say is the biggest lesson learned on bootstrapping a company versus now getting funding?
My gosh, there are so many lessons learned back then. I would say, surprisingly, it's something that has been consistent throughout, and that's creating the right roles and hiring the right people to fill those roles.
I imagine it's also difficult when you're bootstrapped because, like, you don't want to hire too many, or even someone who too costs too much.
And that's exactly the point, right? So oftentimes there were roles that I knew we wanted but didn't have the budget for it, and so either we settled for a lower level role or a lower level of talent. And if there's one thing that I could do going back, I would say, okay, I've got, let's say, a budget of $500,000 for all my resources, new hires that I want to make. I'm going to break the bank on this one role, and I'm going to hire the right person at the right level, at the right talent level. And then maybe I'm going to cut one of those other resources, because if you bring in the right leaders, then they will create additional opportunities where we can go fill in some of those other ones. But there was no playbook. I had to learn that myself.
Let me repeat just so I understand there. So if you say, okay, you have all these roles that you need to fill, instead of trying to fill all the roles with okay talent, fill less roles, but better quality talent.
Correct, especially some of the leadership roles.
The leadership roles. Okay.
Yes. Break the bank on the right ones.
Okay. And if you had to pick a couple departments or leadership roles that you're like, we should have invested in this type of leadership role, is there a specific department or area that you would say this has to have good leadership?
That's like asking me which one of my kids is my favorite kid, and the answer is all of them. Kidding aside, so it's a journey, right? Early stage, it's important to invest in things like product marketing and product management, and not cut any corners there, because you're trying to. We were always building something not to get a quick exit. It was always for the long term. And so to do that right, you want to make sure that foundation is there. So once you have established product market fit to a certain extent, then you want to bring in some really good sales and go-to-market leaders, including marketing, alliances, so on and so forth. But then you shouldn't forget also some of the non-revenue functions, such as finance and HR and ops, areas that we grossly underinvested in at the start. And if there's one thing that I could fix and go back to 2011, that would be one of the things that I would fix.
Is that foundational leadership to be able, that knows what they're doing and can just do a really good job in those key areas that doesn't generate revenue.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Just making the investments, right? Having resources. Whether leaders are important there, but especially just having making an investment to succeed there.
There's a lot when it comes to hiring and thoughts around that, being able to bring the right people in. How big is the team today?
So today we are about 320 or so employees.
Wow. And when it comes to hiring the right people, whether you're bootstrapped or VC funded, what do you see as the common mistakes when you're looking at candidates and trying to choose the right person?
Yeah. Gosh, I could write a book about this, right? Lots and lots of silly mistakes are made, right? From not defining the mandate, the mission of the job, as to what the desired outcomes are from this role, and what the profile of the person that you're looking for. If you put the time ahead, especially for more leadership roles or roles that you hire in bulk, such as account execs or CSMs or what have you, if you put in the time ahead, that's to define the job, and then you have a streamlined process that in of itself is going to be massive. But then, other mistakes as well, sometimes of not being in a hurry and settling for, let's say, a less than ideal talent. And my favorite saying here is, if you hire the wrong person, then the damage that creates, typically it takes about 3 to 6 months to figure out if that's the right person. And then that person, if they are a leader, they would have hired other people. And so to unwind that mess takes a lot of time. But on the same token, sometimes you got to roll the dice and move forward as well, right? So it's finding that right balance. There are just lots and lots of things that I've learned that we're getting much better at, but still not there.
As you said, you could write a book, but you're at the same time still learning as you do it.
For sure.
Coming back though to Bootstrap the first 4 or 5 years, and then funded. What would you say is the most important lesson you learned from going out and seeking funding and acquiring it?
So it's a little bit different when you run a bootstrap company and you want to go get funding versus looking for funding right at the start. So I just want to make sure that the audience knows that, right? Because you've gotten used to doing things a certain way. So putting that aside, it was really important for me when we brought up a first set of investors to pick the right investors where we felt there was the right balance, the dynamics were going to be right. They believed in the product, the company, the space, the leaders, so on and so forth. So while we had multiple offers in terms of term sheets, we ended up going with a great investor who's been with us throughout the journey and super happy. And then when we raised our Series B round, it's also finding like-minded investors. So those are some of the really important things for me personally.
When you're looking for that like-minded, some investor who knows your type of mentality, the team that you're running, and the mission, what are you looking for? Like, what indicators show that they're in sync with the way you think?
Right. So first off, it comes down to the philosophy that the investment firm has. Right. Every VC or PE firm has a certain model. So once you've had enough conversations with investors, you can fairly quickly start to see the trends and profile that. So that's a must at a high level. So then it comes to, once you've kind of applied that filter, so to speak, and then you're speaking to investors within that profile, then it comes down to, for example, who are you working with? Who's going to be sitting on your board? And my whole thing with investors is there are, again, different types of investors, some who are very active, some who are pretty passive. Here's the money and do what you think is right. I don't necessarily have a preference, but my one ask is, if investors want to get to be pretty active and involved in the business and make recommendations, then to please take the time to understand our business. What we don't want is someone sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, you need to do this. Go hire 30 more AEs, or go enterprise, the big deals to be had there. And I've seen this so many times at other companies, right? If you understand our business, then you will understand why I would tell you, no, I don't think that's a good idea. That's going to come later, right? So that's what's important. And thankfully, we have investors who fit that mold.
When you found the investors for your Series A and B, Was it like when you finally, okay, you looked at the preface, okay, the philosophy is right, but was it like when you talked to them, you just felt right? Was it like a moment that you felt good, or was it just a long period that took like, okay,
I'm going to start laughing, right, because it's a cliche, but right in the moment with our first Series A investor, TVC Capital, as soon as I had the conversation, a couple of conversations, I knew these were the guys. And it had helped that they were the last, literally the last party in. So I'd had a fabulous experience to understand who I was looking for. I always draw the analogy to dating, right? It's very much like dating. You got to get to know each other, and I don't want to sound, I don't want this to be a cliche where it's like, you know, love at first sight, but
it was true. It did feel that way. Like, yes, this is good.
Absolutely, and remarkably, even with our second investor, New Spring Capital, I met the partner for breakfast when he was here in town in San Francisco. He didn't have to drive all the way down to meet with me, and we met. And typically, these things happen through a first conversation. We had breakfast together, and literally I told him later as well, right? I mean, that's what ultimately sealed it, because we were able to look each other in the eye and understand how we work, and so on and so forth. Everything else is ultimately a detail. If we don't fit their criteria and vice versa, then we won't partner, right? So it's that personal connection is really important.
Got it. Well, I appreciate both the understanding of bootstrapping and then funding, and in the moment you feel right, but making sure the philosophy is there, and then building a team. Once you have all those ingredients, obviously you need to grow your customer base. So what I'd love to kind of focus on here is when it comes to marketing and sales, to be able to grow your platform and your solution. What are you seeing as common mistakes people make, and how have you avoided those mistakes or learned from them to be able to scale?
Yeah, so when it comes to sales and marketing, and I like to use the term just go to market or GTM in general, especially for what we do. Mm-hmm. Every company is different, right? So it really depends on the precise scenario that we have. So I'll say just in general, maybe looking at some of the mistakes that we've made, is we've been predominantly a brand-based inbound type model, and I'm a huge believer of that. But then I think perhaps we didn't make the right investments maybe 4 or 5 years ago to look at other avenues as well. And so these are all things that you learn in time. Another thing that I see often is throwing money at a problem, especially when it comes to marketing, right? It's very easy to say, okay, what's the cost of an MQL? What's the cost of an opportunity? Let's pour in, let's go with paid advertising, so on and so forth. And if you don't understand what the return is going to be, if you don't have the ability to measure and use analytics and use data, then likely it's not going to work. I mean, certainly you can get lucky, but that doesn't work. Hiring good salespeople, gosh, that's I can go on that for a fair bit. All the mistakes we've made there.
Really cool about that.
But now we know how to do that, right? So and then the importance of some of the other indirect channels, such as channel sales, OEM sales, right? All of that has to be taken into account.
So we could probably spend another hour on each of those subjects. But if we could just take a quick deep dive into, let's start with inbound. I mean, would you say a big lesson learned there? Because it sounds like you started with that and have always been focused on it, using that as your foundation of getting it. What was a big lesson learned of, or even a tactic that you did that has worked really well to keep the inbound leads coming in?
Right. So I'll give you a lesson first. So when you have a model, it's like the gift that keeps giving. And so you know, we use this term here internally, the run rate business. Without doing anything much, we know there's a certain amount of business growing every month that's going to come to us. It's easy to get comfortable with that model, because you don't then start thinking about how can I turn this inbound stream into something 10x or 100x. because you can. But since it's been there and it's a given, assumptions are made that, well, that's what we do. In terms of a tactic that's worked pretty well for us, I think just staying with the inbound theme, right? Knowing what we do and being able to take that and harness that and build a machine out of it, I think that's something that we've done really well.
Like articles, like you're talking like creating the right articles that people are just finding it, or is it just building a certain brand by getting your referrals?
It's more about the business problem that you solve and being able to articulate that in the right way on the website and through other channels, right? And then once you do that, then people know how to find you, because it's not like you're trying to sell them something that they don't want. These are real pain points that these companies have.
If you articulate properly on the website, people who have it will search and find you and say, I want you, because you've properly described it. And they see that you are the solution.
Right, and then suddenly once you engage with them, you can speak their language. They know that we know their problem. We speak the same language, and that becomes really important, especially in a space like integration where it's such a big space. There are so many different verticals and types of business processes that need to be automated. It becomes important to be able to not be too broad and be able to focus on certain things.
And I feel like actually on your site, you've actually built out some nice descriptors, like, are you in this category, like, SaaS software, e-commerce, supply chain, finance, accounting. And so you've probably built then specific language. If someone's coming to you and they're in that space, you're saying, all right, this is what you need for the typical type of integrations. Did I get that right?
Correct. So I call that self-identifying, right? Either based on your role, based on your industry, based on the SaaS apps that you use, or based on the business processes that are within your domain. How quickly can we identify with you that you've come to the right place?
Gotcha. Okay. Now, switching real quick, though, over to the salesperson, and then we'll wrap up here. You said there's a lot of lessons learned there, and you've learned them all. What would you say is the biggest takeaway if someone's going to build out their sales team and hiring the right client service people? What would you say is one takeaway that you've learned?
I would say hiring the right sales leader is so important and so hard to do.
How do you know you have a good sales leader versus not a good sales leader?
See, unless you've done it before, it's a little hard, because how do you know to interview properly? And then how do you know to detect the signs early enough if they are not the right person, and either put them on the right path or part ways?
Is there like a quality that you're looking for, like a specific demeanor or background or knowledge?
Less so. I think it's their approach on how they go about solving the sales problem. Is it a holistic approach? Are they just trying to hit a number at any cost? Do they care about the success of the company? I have this saying, you can always hit your number by doing various things, some unnatural things as well, to get across the line. And sometimes sales leaders need to do what they need to do, and that's how they get paid. But do they, if I were to just put one thing, right, do they truly understand the business problem that we're trying to solve? Do they truly understand how we're going to market? And then are they good sales leaders once they have that context to be able to execute? Oftentimes you'll find sales leaders come in with a playbook that they've used in 2 or 3 other companies. And they may have been super successful and they might be really good, but you have to adapt that to what we're trying to do. You have to understand why we're in business. Why do our customers buy? If you don't understand that, the potential that you have, the ceiling that you have is always going to be limited.
So if they come in all bravado saying, "I've got my sales thing, it's bulletproof. I'm just going to apply it to your business. It's going to be great," and they don't ask questions, they don't want to understand. Those should be some red flags.
Those should be red flags, and I love it when a sales leader comes in and says, "I've got a process." That's one of the questions we ask them. What's your sales process? Walk me through your sales process. Knowing that if you've done the job for a while, you've learned across multiple jobs that you've formulated a certain way of doing things, right? And you've abstracted that. That is phenomenal. Now, but you cannot just then come in and say, okay, for everything I see the same nail and I've got the one hammer and I'm just going to use it, right? So they have to be able to apply that.
Yeah. I know we could probably spend another hour digging into those lessons, but thank you so much, Jan, for sharing throughout, from funding, through hiring, through marketing and sales, go-to-market strategy, a ton of insight. For those that want to learn more about Celigo, definitely listen to our first part of our interview where he broke it down so nicely. Also go to celigo.com. And if you need a iPaaS solution for your company, definitely check them out. Thanks again, Jan, for joining us. It's good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Again, UpTech Report. This is our founder's journey. Take a look at our other episodes at uptechreport.com. UpTech Report is sponsored by TerraLeap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.